Every year, on beaches around the world, hundreds of thousands of people are rescued from a powerful ocean force threatening to drag them out to sea. Many survive, but thousands of lives are tragically lost, often after a frantic and terrifying struggle. Some call these deadly forces riptides or undertows, but experts call them rip currents.
I remember seeing him coming just as I started to go underwater.
I saw two men in the water. One of them was screaming for help.
These rips are unlike anything you've ever seen. They're monsters.
And they're trying to keep everybody out of the water, and it's chaos.
Now we're not dealing with people that can swim and are battling. We're dealing with people that cannot swim that are sinking.
I knew if I didn't get them in the boat fast and back to that beach, no one was going to survive.
They rip people off their feet and carry them hundreds of yards out to sea.
They just quickly got separated out in the water. They couldn't get back in. It was really scary to watch.
I saw the guy go underwater several times. He was clearly struggling to stay afloat.
We lost 2 people that day. A lot more people were in trouble.
This is a story about the world's greatest beach safety hazard and the threat it poses at some of the most beautiful and popular beaches on Earth in South Africa, Brazil, Mexico, Costa Rica, and the United States. Rip Current Survival will tell the stories of those whose lives have been changed forever, with real rescues caught on camera. Cutting-edge science beneath the water's surface will journey into the heart of rips as researchers in the UK, France, New Zealand, and Australia unlock the secrets of how these currents operate. And Rip Current Survival will tell the story of the major challenges facing different coastal communities and entire nations as they struggle to make their beaches safer from those deadly currents. Rip currents can be found on any beach with breaking waves, and around the world, they're responsible for at least 80% of all beach rescues. Hundreds of thousands of people being pulled from the clutches of the sea. In many nations, about 8 out of every 10 people who drown on a beach drown in a rip current. And in some countries, that adds up to hundreds of lives every summer. This makes rip currents the world's #1 beach safety hazard. And managing this serious public safety problem is a major challenge for governments, communities, and beach safety groups. For Henry Roud, these deadly factors were front and center in an incident he captured on video in Cancun.
I spent a month in Cancun, and I could not believe how many people were being rescued every day.
During his vacation, Henry witnessed many rip current rescues on the same dangerous stretch of beach. But one incident was particularly chilling.
So I was sitting there just relaxing, and I heard commotion on the beach. I heard some people yelling. I looked over the edge of the balcony. I saw that there were 2 men in the water. One was a little closer and was desperately trying to swim to shore, and the other one was way out there. Like, it was just a matter of a few seconds, and he was way out there. And he was yelling ayuda, which is Spanish for help. So he was clearly in trouble. One of the lifeguards had jumped into the water to rescue the man that was closest to the shore. And another lifeguard jumped in to go after the man that was further out. So that took him a while to get there. And I remember zooming in on the guy who was further away, and I could see he was really struggling. Like the rescues I'd seen during the time I'd been there were never at the point where someone was like in active drowning state. This man was clearly in drowning state. The second lifeguard did get to him, but before he got to him, I saw the guy go underwater several times. He was clearly struggling to stay afloat. The lifeguard did get to him. It seemed to me just in time because we had to pull him from under the water back up to the surface. So I captured a couple of stills where they were bringing him back to the beach. As a tourist, when you go to a beach for the first time, you don't really pay attention, just look at what other people are doing and you do the same thing. So for me, I'm definitely going to be looking at signs now and understanding what they are, because I've seen people ignoring signs and seeing what happens to them.
Even though they can be found on most beaches on the planet, studies have found that the majority of beachgoers know very little about these currents. So what exactly is a rip current?
So let's start with what a rip current is not. It's not an undertow. It's not going to pull you under the water. It's not a tide. It's basically a current. It's a flow of water in one direction.
Australian-based coastal scientist Rob Brander is one of the world's leading authorities on rip currents. As a young scientist, he witnessed a rip current drowning tragedy, and in the decades since, has been on a mission to teach rip current survival. Now, around the world, Rob Brander is known as Dr. Rip. Every summer, Rob can be found on beaches releasing a harmless colored dye into the surf as part of his public education campaign. Within seconds, the purple dye reveals a lurking rip current.
The simplest way to describe rip currents is that they're strong, narrow, seaward flowing currents that extend from the shoreline out beyond the breaking waves. And they exist to bring all that extra water that's coming in with the breaking waves back offshore. And all of our recent research has shown that rips are incredibly complex, and they're much more unpredictable and dangerous than we could ever have imagined.
People drown in rip currents because they panic or because they try to swim against the flow of the rip.
We know from studying rips using GPS drifters and other technology that their flow can be quite variable. Sometimes they can circulate almost like eddies. Sometimes the flow can go beyond the line of breaking waves. And generally, rip currents will flow about maybe 1 meter per second, but every rip has a tendency to suddenly pulse, which means their speed literally doubles up to speeds of 2 meters per second.
A trained lifeguard wearing flippers shows how futile it is to try and swim against a rip flowing at 2 meters per second. Derek Johns is a former Marine who has served in combat. But when he and his family went swimming on an unguarded beach on Nantucket, he never expected that decision would lead to a battle for survival. It was caught on camera by his daughter, who was lucky to make it out of the surf alive.
The water conditions, oddly, were very, very calm. We were all swimming around, joking around in the water without much of a care about anything. Instantaneously, things changed for the worse. Erin started to get swept out. When I told her to swim and I heard her voice, there was panic in her voice, and I knew we were in some trouble.
I can't!
When we realized that we were in a rip current, I tried to get to Erin as fast as I could, and I was able, literally on my tippy toes, fight the current, and then grab her GoPro stick and start pulling her to shore. My wife ran into the water, and you can see that handoff in the film. And as soon as I handed that to her, I kind of let go of myself and lost my traction in the sand, and I got shot right out of it, and I'm gone. They were still being able to keep some traction on the ground, but the waves were literally breaking on them, and that's what you keep seeing, that tumbling. The fear in me was that they were going to get shot past me, so I was trying to swim as hard as I could and just keep them in front of me, which is absolutely the wrong thing you're supposed to do in a rip, is swim against the current. They were getting to maybe 4 feet, 3 feet, and they were still just getting pounded and turned. At that point, lifeguards from down the beach and other people that had heard the commotion and heard, us yelling for help, started coming into the water. I think it was a guy by the name of Tommy with orange shorts. I remember seeing him coming just as I started to go underwater, and he was like, "Just put your arms around me," and he just backed up inch by inch by inch to get me out of the water at that point. Another 10, 15 seconds, I would have been gone. I'm a former Marine, I was in the Gulf War, and I don't think I can say I was that scared ever over there. Swimming into the current, that's Mother Nature. There was nothing stronger than that I've ever felt. So that was probably the biggest takeaway for me. We're a textbook of what to do wrong. I think that's how rip currents take most of the casualties that they take, is because people panic, whether they're alone or with someone else, and try and fight that current. I wouldn't have won that battle. I didn't win that battle, and if not for Tommy, I would have died that day. No doubt in my mind.
Derek Johns almost drowned because he panicked and tried to swim against the flow of the rip. He also chose to swim on a beach without lifeguards.
Your chances of drowning on a beach anywhere in the world that has lifeguards is really small, which is why we encourage people to always swim near lifeguards. But the unfortunate reality is that people will always swim on beaches where there are no lifeguards. That's the reality. So one of the big challenges is really trying to understand, why is it that people are going to beaches without lifeguards?
Australia has the world's 6th longest coastline, and 85% of its population live within 50 kilometers of a beach. Every summer, this aquatic nation experiences many tragic rip current drownings. The summer of 2022-2023 was particularly tragic for Australia, the second worst on record over the last decade, and all occurred on beaches without lifeguards. In many places, there would have been even more victims if surfers hadn't been on hand to perform rescues.
Grab the board, turn around.
It's been estimated that Australian surfers make just as many rescues, if not more, than the nation's lifeguards and lifesavers.
Turn around, lie down properly. Hold on.
The primary beach safety message in Australia is to swim between the red and yellow flags. It's a safety message slogan that's consistently repeated, particularly after each tragic beach drowning. But in a country that has over 11,000 beaches, with less than 5% patrolled by lifeguards or lifesavers, is this primary beach safety message enough?
The red and yellow flag system works. It's rare for somebody to drown between the flags. And we need to keep promoting that message, swim between the red and yellow flags. But the reality is, we need to do more. It's not enough. There are so many beaches out there that are popular with people. They have no lifeguards, no flags. What are we going to do to keep those people safe? It's just totally unrealistic to think that everyone is going to find a beach with red and yellow flags and swim between them. It's a huge challenge to think, how are we going to connect with people going to beaches without lifeguards and without flags to keep them safe? What's the message going to be?
Rip currents are a major public safety issue for many small coastal Australian communities, and one that a beachside town in northern New South Wales is struggling to deal with. A problem brought into focus by a tragic event. Fingal Head, northern New South Wales. This small beachside community has a permanent population of just 600. But in the summer months, the numbers swell as tourists fill the caravan parks. Its popular surf beach is patrolled by lifesavers. But this isn't the beach that many locals and tourists are visiting. Less than 800 meters to the south, and on the other side of the headland, is Dreamtime Beach. At its northern tip, this stretch of coastline is unpatrolled by lifesavers or lifeguards, and is considered a highly dangerous location, notorious for rip currents. But despite that, every summer, tourists and locals take to its unpredictable waters. It's a high-stakes gamble that has led to fatalities and many close calls. Good Friday, March 25th, 2016. Dreamtime Beach was busy as people took to the surf to enjoy the long weekend. 7-year-old Rihanna is playing in shallow water while her mom watches on. Without warning, a large set of waves sweeps Rahana off her feet and into deeper water. Within seconds, she's being pulled away from the beach. It's a flash rip, and Rahana is firmly in its grip. Ryan Martin hears the screams and runs into the water, heading straight for Rahana. The rip current is now pulsing, pulling Rahana further out to sea, each wave blanketing her with water. Ryan Martin was once a volunteer lifesaver, and he's pushing himself to reach Rahana before she disappears from view. When Ryan reaches Rahana, she desperately clings to him. She's consumed with fear, and Ryan knows that he must find a way to calm her down. Alone and increasingly isolated, Ryan is fighting to keep Rahana afloat and safe. But the heavy effort is taking its toll. He's becoming exhausted. More help is coming. Luke Robinson has raced down from the headland and starts the long swim out to Ryan and Rahana. When he reaches the pair, he urges Ryan to head back to shore, but Ryan refuses to leave the young girl. Together, Luke and Ryan work to keep Rahana afloat, taking turns to support her weight. Levi, a local surfer, is now in the water and frantically paddling towards them. Ryan is so fatigued that he can barely keep himself afloat, but he continues to support Rahana. Yet another surge of water rolls over the top of them, pushing Ryan beneath the surface. When the water clears, Ryan is gone. When Levi arrives, he can see only 2 people in the water, and his surfboard becomes their life raft.
Hang on.
In the distance, Levi can see a rescue boat racing towards them from Fingal Head Surf Lifesaving Club. Among the crew is Steve Kudzius.
The vision that I saw is something that you would never want to create ever again. It all unfolded. A sense of silence came over. The crashing waves seemed like they stopped. The lifeless or semi-lifeless people in the water, the look of distress on people's faces is absolutely gut-wrenching. Luke and the young girl didn't have a lot of time left. Once they fell unconscious, I knew it was a race against the clock to be able to save their lives. When I got them to the beach, they started to vomit and show signs of life again. At that point, members of the public assisted, and they survived. I returned immediately to find Levi had found Ryan and was holding on to Ryan as the best he could. So I picked up Ryan and returned him to shore and did all I could to revive him, but we weren't successful.
Ryan's family have struggled with their loss. They live now with the memory of what Ryan sacrificed to help a young child caught in a rip current.
He sacrificed his own life so that someone else, so he could save someone else, a stranger that he didn't know. And I don't think there's any bigger sacrifice than that. And that is hard for us as a family because we want him here, but I don't think there's no better definition of bravery than what he had done.
For Steve Kudzius, this tragedy at Dreamtime Beach would become a powerful motivator to bring his Fingal community together to try and address their rip current problem. It would also mark the beginning of a personal crusade to help reduce rip current fatalities around the world by creating innovative beach safety education resources. In the United Kingdom, the nation's primary beach safety organization, the Royal National Lifeboat Institution, along with scientists from University of Plymouth's Coastal Processes Research Group, are dealing with their own hazardous beach that has a unique rip current problem. The United Kingdom has beaches patrolled by lifeguards from the Royal National Lifeboat Institution, or RNLI. And rip currents are a major safety issue on most of these beaches.
Our #1 hazard in the ocean around the UK coastline, particularly down here in the southwest of England, are rip currents. So of those 3,000 incidents that the lifeguards attended to last year, that they responded to rescue people from the sea, more than 1,500 of those, so more than half, were people being caught in rip currents.
It's July 2022 at Crantock Beach in Cornwall, and the RNLI, University of Plymouth, and a wider group of local landowners, businesses, and community groups have just unveiled the UK's first digital beach hazard warning sign that provides the public with daily forecasts on beach conditions, including rip current hazards. It's an innovative response to a sharp rise in rip current incidents on Crantock Beach, an ongoing problem made worse by nature's fury. Crantock is a small beach facing the Atlantic Ocean on the north coast of Cornwall. It's patrolled by RNLI lifeguards during the summer and is popular with beachgoers, particularly families who enjoy swimming in the River Gannel estuary that's directly connected to the beach. Normally a safe swimming location for the public, until everything changed.
Back in 2014, we had some real wild winter storms here. One of those storms in February of 2014 took out the rock armour which used to hold the River Gannel back against the Pentyre headland. As soon as that rock armour was displaced, that changed the course of the River Gannel. And the river, which was predictable and used to flow alongside the headland, suddenly turned course and started to head across the middle of the beach. That brings problems and brought problems immediately for us the following summer.
The change in the river flow started creating havoc with beachgoers. Unsuspecting swimmers were finding themselves caught in the estuarine currents flowing out of the river, and then quickly being transported across the beach directly into the pathway of rip currents. There was an immediate increase in rescues, rising from less than 40 per year before the storms in 2014 to over 190 per year in 2018. Sadly, there was also 2 fatalities, which occurred outside of lifeguard hours. With a growing public safety problem on their hands, the RNLI reached out to scientists from University of Plymouth.
We wanted to go out and directly measure the flows that were happening on the beach. We wanted to measure how big the waves were, how far in and out the tide was going, and how strong the currents were at different places on the beach. We measure the dry parts of the beach using a drone, and that gives us a really detailed picture of the shape of the beach. The second type of data we collected were measurements of the flows, and we collected those using instruments fixed in position. These are what we call Eulerian measurements, so they're a single point in space where we're measuring water flowing past, and we're measuring how fast that water's flowing and in what direction it's flowing. The third type of data that we collected were what we call Lagrangian measurements. So these are measurements of the flows where the measurements are moving with the flow. And with those 3 different types of data, you build up a picture of where the currents are, how fast they're flowing, and how those currents and waves change as the change in tide and change in wave conditions alter them. We get really big tides here in Cornwall. The spring tide range would be about 6 meters between low tide and high tide vertically. In terms of how far in and out the tide comes, that results in about 1 kilometre difference horizontally between low tide and high tide. We know from previous research that waves and tides are really the key factors that switch on and off rip currents. If you get the right combination of waves and tides, rips will start up, and as soon as the tide changes beyond a certain point, those rips will just disappear. After analysing all of our data, the main thing we learned is really that we have a combination of rip currents and estuary currents at this beach, and they don't work in isolation. The two things combine and they create quite a unique pattern of currents, and the sum total of all this is actually a higher level of hazard than you would tend to get at an average beach with rip currents. Once we collected all this data, we had all the information we needed to set up a really detailed computer model. So effectively what we've created is a digital twin of the beach. It's a way that we can simulate what the beach will be doing under different wave and tide conditions. The model basically predicts how fast the currents will flow, it predicts where the waves will break, with what intensity they will break, and all of this gives us a picture of where the currents are going.
This dynamic daily forecasting information with Smart Beach technology is presented to the public by a large digital sign.
So we've invested in new signage. We've got digital signs in the car park as you enter the beach at Crantock, which now gets that message to the public. Because our lifeguards finish at 6 o'clock in the evening. When it's really important is not when the lifeguards are there to keep an eye on people and have the flags out and are talking to everybody. It's when the lifeguards aren't there. It's when people need to understand for themselves what the risk is and whether they can venture into the sea and whether it's within their ability. So we're able to give that detail with our messaging and with that information to the public, and we hope ultimately one day this will save lives.
In South Africa, a mass rescue caught on camera highlights the reality facing many nations in the fight for rip current safety. It's New Year's Day at Amanzimtoti Beach in South Africa, and a mass rip current rescue is unfolding. Filming the footage and overseeing the rescue is Superintendent for Beaches for the eThekwini Municipality, Jace Govender.
Mass rescue, about 10 to 15 patients got washed out from this crowd.
Jace manages 69 kilometers of coastline with 9 beaches patrolled by lifeguards. And in the peak of summer, these beaches attract hundreds of thousands of South Africans. Amanzimtoti is particularly hazardous.
Conditions are very dangerous because the drop-off is so close. It's a very, very deep bathing area, so you do get a very large shore break, and that creates a big problem.
In addition to the hazardous surf conditions, lifeguards at Amanzimtoti also have another challenge when it comes to keeping the large numbers of beachgoers safe.
In South Africa, we come from a community that very few know how to swim, and that's simply because we have a coastline. Most of the people live away from the coastline, and so they do not have access to beaches. South Africans and people in Africa spend very little time getting educated in water safety. We have no structures in our school that educate people about the dangers of the oceans and the waters. We don't have pools for people to learn how to swim. So 90% of the country are not swimmers. So on that day, the surf conditions were huge, probably about 8 to 10 foot swell, coming off a very deep channel and breaking into a very shallow bank, and that's a recipe for disaster. As you can see, this is dangerous extreme conditions. It's some of the worst conditions you'll find in the world. I could see the rescue happening from about 400 meters away while I was driving down. So we were flying down the beach, 2 vehicles, the lights blazing, to get to the rescue. I saw the guys trying to launch the boat through the massive shore break. They got bashed a few times, got pushed back a couple of times, and that rip went straight out to sea, so it was directly in front of the bathing area. Out of the 13 guys who were out there, probably about 10 of them could not swim. So if a person cannot swim, within seconds he's going down. So lifeguards got to go and keep them afloat. Now we're not dealing with people that can swim and that are battling, we're dealing with people that cannot swim, that are sinking. And the boat was in and out of that huge sea, just picking up people. At one stage, I think he had 8 guys on that boat and bringing them close, bringing them back into the beach. Mass rescue happening. The rest of the guys do not want to stop swimming, do not want to leave the water. Hey, guys, while this is happening, there goes another one. Another one there! People are just not listening. Lifeguards running. I spotted that. I screamed for lifeguards. Lifeguards going. The public is clapping because their friends got rescued. It's dangerous, it's scary, but for the public, it's fun because for them to see their friends getting a boat ride, for them to see their friends being brought back to the beach, it's fun for them, but they don't realize how serious it is. They could have lost 13 people that day. I must take my hat out to the lifeguards on this beach. 0 drownings during the bathing hours for the last 5 years. And you could say probably 2 to 3 million people have come to this beach over the last 5 years. So that's an outstanding result.
With few resources to teach locals how to swim and no formal beach safety education in schools, all that's protecting the public in South Africa from rip current tragedies is the work of dedicated lifeguards and an enforced rule that makes it illegal for the public to swim on unpatrolled beaches.
Okay, so you're not allowed to swim in any area where there's no lifeguards. You must go swim with the lifeguards there on the main beach for your own safety. Right? Please stay out of the water here. Thank you.
"13,000 kilometers from Amanzimtoti, Costa Rica is dealing with a major rip current problem. And this country, that has a tourist economy reliant on its beaches, is trying to protect locals and international visitors with just a handful of lifeguards. Costa Rica may be small, with only 5 million citizens, but its 640 beautiful beaches on both the Pacific Ocean and the Caribbean Sea has helped establish the country as the holiday destination in Central America. But Costa Rica has a beach safety crisis. Less than 3% of its beaches are patrolled by lifeguards. And every year, rip currents claim the lives of many locals and tourists. It's a public safety problem that's now beginning to reflect on the country's international image. And the citizens are looking to the government for answers.
From 2001 until last year, we're talking about just at our beaches over 1,100 drownings. And that is about 60 drownings per year.
Among international tourists, American citizens make up the largest number of rip current fatalities. It's a problem that the U.S. Embassy in Costa Rica is well aware of.
We get about 1.7 million tourists here every year, and we have about 120,000 Americans living here full-time. Not everybody is aware of rip currents and the danger rip currents pose to unaware swimmers. And unfortunately, we have a number of American citizens drowning in Costa Rica every year. There's nothing harder in my job to have to make that call to loved ones back in the United States about, someone who passed away in a rip current.
The number of rip current drownings in Costa Rica has been rising for decades, as an ever-growing number of tourists visit the country's many unpatrolled beaches.
In the past, we have a lot of history. We have one beaches with a lot of people there, no lifeguards. Maybe in the 80s, in the 70s, 60s, we have a lot of fishermen with small boats near the beaches, and sometimes they are the lifeguards in that moment. I think that since the 80s, with the surf culture that we have in our beaches, these guys become, in many times, in lifeguards.
With no organized national beach safety infrastructure in place, several communities have taken it upon themselves to establish their own lifeguard services to help protect visiting beachgoers. The lifeguard service for popular Jaco Beach on Costa Rica's Pacific coast was founded by local resident Marvin Chen in 2007 and has become one of the country's most successful examples of a lifeguard service funded solely by the local municipality. Here, 8 lifeguards are permanently employed to protect beachgoers. On a small number of other beaches, private lifeguard services are funded just by local businesses, and when funds are tight, lifeguards don't get paid, and the lifeguard services can regularly shut down for lengthy periods. Finding trained lifeguards to fill these positions is also a major challenge faced by many beach communities. It's a problem that the businesses and residents of popular Dominical Beach have been dealing with for 25 years.
We are desperately needing lifeguards. We have money to pay them, and we have everything that we need. At the moment, we have only 1 lifeguard. We need at least 4. We are training people today who are surfers to be lifeguards. We want to train all of our local surfers, everyone who comes to this beach regularly, want to train them to rescue swimmers and surfers. That is our program today. Why do we need lifeguards at Dominical Beach? When I came here, the traditional drowning rate at this beach was 1 drowning every 19 days. Hundreds, maybe thousands of lives have been saved in the last 25 years due to not only rescues, but prevention. And that's what we're training today, prevention and rescue.
North of Dominical, an innovative beach safety education program is being run by a non-government organization called Swim Safe Costa Rica. And it may just be the long-term answer to Steve's lifeguard problems at Dominical Beach, along with a new government law mandating that coastal communities provide permanent lifeguard services. In the United States, authorities are dealing with their own rip current problems on beaches that can attract up to 375 million swimmers every summer. The United States has over 120,000 kilometers of coastline that give it some of the best beaches on the planet. But on the other hand, it also comes with a very high number of rip current rescues and fatalities. United States Life Saving Association estimate the number of rip current rescues performed by lifeguards to be over 80,000 per year.
In the United States and actually around the world, rip currents are our #1 beach hazard, just period, way above anything else we have going on.
Rip currents are the #1 hazard on U.S. beaches for a number of reasons, but I think one of the most important is the exposure. So, there's a lot of people at the beach in the summertime, the weather might look nice, it might look safe, but you can have hazardous rip currents.
In the United States and other countries, they don't use the red and yellow flag system. Instead, they have lifeguards situated at regular intervals along the beach, often in towers, and people can swim anywhere along that beach. And it's the job of the lifeguards to keep their eyes on the whole stretch of beach and all those swimmers.
Bordered by the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans and the Gulf of Mexico, every beach in the United States has its own unique kind of rip currents.
Here in Galveston, we've got our own types of rip currents, of course. We all think we're special at every beach. So what we have here predominantly is something called a structural rip current. So we have a number of rock groins that were put in here to prevent beach erosion. We've also got fishing piers like the one behind me. and each of those generates rip currents. So that's most of what we're doing here on Galveston Island, is moving people away from those rock piers. We do that about 300,000 times a year, where we move people out of danger, away from areas with rip currents.
Wrightsville Beach Ocean Rescue falls under Wrightsville Beach Fire Department. So Wrightsville Beach is approximately 4 miles of beach. We can find anywhere from 30 to 40,000 people coming over here to Wrightsville Beach in a single day. Rip currents here really are the biggest risk to the beachgoers. We have multiple types of rips. I mean, we have some of the rips that form next to permanent structures, so our piers and our jetties. But probably the most dangerous rips we face here are what we consider the flash rips.
The Wrightsville Beach Fire Department uses drones to help patrol their 4-mile stretch of beach. From the air, the dark, churning waters of rip currents are much easier to spot, and so are swimmers who have found themselves trapped.
That video demonstrates really the most common situation that we come across. You had a group of subjects, they noticed that where they were caught in a rip or felt themselves being pulled off the sandbar, and they attempted to swim back. And that's what our lifeguards are looking for. They noticed, and in that video you can see the lifeguards going out to make the rescue. We've had days where we pulled 20, 25 to 30 people out of a single rip, where we've had 200 plus rescues in a single day.
Some of the most dangerous rip currents in the United States are also where you'll find its famous surf beaches, Southern California.
The California coastline is over 840 miles long, with hundreds of beaches of all shapes, sizes, and types. And rip currents are the principal hazard at the majority of those beaches. Before taking a research role in beach safety and drowning prevention, I worked for several years as an ocean lifeguard for California state parks. Many of those years I worked at Huntington State Beach as a deckhand on the Surfwatch rescue boats. Huntington State Beach is a 2-mile stretch of sand in probably one of the most dangerous coastlines in the world. It's a south-facing beach that is dominated by large surf and very dangerous rip currents. These rips are like things you've never seen. They're monsters, raging rivers that are flowing from the beach right through the surf zone out to sea. They pull so fast that they rip sand off the bottom. So in color, they're dark and sandy. On the surface, it's uneven and choppy, and it can sweep someone right off their feet to a place where they can't touch and get into serious trouble. All lifeguards have rescues and incidents that are seared into their minds forever. And one that I will never forget is this weekend in 2012, where we made hundreds of rescues off the boat and from the beach in just a Saturday and a Sunday. It was an afternoon when these mega rips were firing on all cylinders, and we would show up to one, make a rescue, maybe multiple rescues in one rip. We would get people back to shore or to safety out on the boat, and then as soon as we were done, we would get another call immediately to go down the beach to another rip, and we would pull up and just see more heads, more rescues, and this went on all afternoon. Some of these people, we would get to them and they were seconds away from going underwater. They were really struggling, and the only thing that was going to save them was that lifeguard being there quickly. A drowning death in Huntington is extremely rare despite these mega rips and these really challenging conditions. And if anything, it speaks to the incredible job that the lifeguards do in keeping people safe on these beaches.
The United States has such a big population, and most people live a long way from the beach. So they're really not getting any rip current education. They probably don't understand what the beach safety flags mean, and they don't have an appreciation of just how important lifeguards are. So when they do go on holiday and they go to these popular beaches, they're often ignoring all the safety advice, the safety flags, and the fact that they should be swimming near lifeguards.
Brian Daniels and his family were on vacation in Florida's Panama City Beach in 2019, when the surf conditions created by Hurricane Barry far offshore led to the formation of powerful rip currents.
I was just enjoying the day. I was standing outside on the balcony having my cup of coffee. My wife was out there with me, and we were just talking about the day and our plans, and she spotted 2 people in the water, and she said, "That doesn't look good."
We just couldn't believe how far out they were, it being a double red flag day. People were on the beach were yelling at them to come in, that they couldn't. You could see that they were starting to struggle.
Rob Brander identifies the culprit at once.
Right away from the shot, I can see there's a pretty prominent, what we call channel rip current. That's the channel rip current right there, the dark gap between the areas of breaking waves. You can see the two of them, they're starting to separate a little bit, but and they're trying to get back. He's actually trying to, or she's trying to do the backstroke. They're trying to get back. It's not working. This rip is flowing so fast.
A short 2 minutes after being caught in the rip, a sheriff's deputy responds to their distress.
I knew that it was going to be difficult for him to get out there. They were so far out in the water. You could see them being pulled deeper and deeper into the water and the waves crashing over them.
Both swimmers are firmly in the grip of a fast-flowing rip current, and now their rescuer is being pummeled by the giant waves.
We were more worried about the police officer that had gone out there first. He seemed to be struggling with the water.
You know, the main trajectory of the rip has taken him right past these people, right past them. So he hasn't even reached the people he's trying to save, and now he's desperately trying to get to them. But, you know, I'm sure at the same time he's starting to wonder about his own safety. He's in trouble now as well.
They just quickly got separated out in the water. The waves were really big, crashing over them, and they couldn't get back in. It was really scary to watch.
What's happened is the woman has somehow been hit by a few waves, and that white water is actually on the surface and is moving back towards the beach. So she's being transported back to the shallow water, whereas the trajectory of the rip has taken the man further offshore. Now that just shows how complex rip current flow is.
He kept getting just pulled so much further and further away. The waves were just huge, crashing over him. Every time the wave would come, we were just waiting for him to pop back up out of the water.
A lifeguard on a rescue board is the first to reach the female swimmer. More first responders arrive at the beach.
So at this stage, you know, the camera is focusing on the lifeguard, but these people aren't the issue. I mean, they're on a flotation board. She's going to be okay. What's interesting is what's happened to the man who was going further offshore.
We honestly thought he was drowning. The way he was moving, the way his arms were flailing, we honestly thought he might have taken in so much water that he had drowned.
So now we've got a couple of boards in the water with lifeguards. We've got another lifeguard coming out with a rescue can. We've got some bystanders starting to get involved and some bystanders starting to form a human chain. But this is extremely dangerous because you're putting other people at risk. You know, there's a sudden drop off into the main part of the rip, and if somebody was to lose their grip in that chain, well, they're stuck in a rip as well.
Meanwhile, the male swimmer has luckily broken free of the rip current and has used the waves to inch his way closer to the beach.
Now this is crazy. I'm not sure who's got the man who's offshore. He was so lucky that the waves pushed him in, but he's like a rag doll there. He's got no energy left at all. You know, I look at this and I think he was a minute from drowning, maybe less, because he is just completely exhausted. So they've got the woman on the board, but you know, that lifeguard, he's been in there for 4 or 5 minutes trying to paddle 10 to 15 yards and can't do it because that's how strong the rip current is.
The two folks, when they came to shore, they looked like they had had a fight for their lives trying to get out of that water. The gentleman was laying on the ground vomiting water, and the lady was sitting up, and we knew that they both were going to be okay.
Despite the treacherous conditions and double red flags, members of the public continued to enter the water at Panama City Beach. By the end of that day, authorities had made another 39 rescues from rip currents. Tragically, one person drowned. The United States averages 100 rip current fatalities per year. But there's a country south of the U.S. that tragically records up to 750 annual rip current drownings, despite having one of the world's largest lifeguard services. Brazil is the largest country in South America and home to over 210 million people, with approximately 6 million tourists visiting each year. Most come to enjoy the nation's 2,000 stunning beaches.
We have 8,000 kilometers of beaches, and the most popular one is in Rio de Janeiro, where, for example, in a high season, one day you can have 3 million people on the beach just on Rio de Janeiro city. So it's a lot of people going to the beach and exposed to hazards.
But behind the endless stretches of surf and sand lies a major problem. Brazil has a drowning epidemic. 16 Brazilians drown every day across all water forms, including rivers, dams, pools, and beaches. On average, Brazil experiences approximately 750 rip current drownings every year. These fatalities occur despite Brazil also having one of the largest lifeguard services in the world.
We do have a lot of lifeguards in Brazil, estimate like 20 to 25,000 full lifeguards.
Brazil's lifeguards also undertake more rip current rescues than any other lifeguard service.
In one day, in one beach, we can do something like 1,000 rescues. And the reason for that is the population is not exactly educated enough to know how to avoid the rip currents, which is responsible for 80–85% of the drowning at the beach.
Approximately 40% of Brazil's beaches are patrolled by lifeguards. But despite this, millions of Brazilians choose to swim on unguarded beaches, resulting in up to 750 people drowning every year from rip currents. It's estimated that number of drownings has actually decreased by 45% over the last years, thanks in part to the expansion of lifeguard services, but more importantly, because of dynamic beach safety education programs being presented to the public by Sobrasa, the life-saving Brazilian society. Dr. David Spillman is the organization's founder.
When you educate people, it's the most important tool that we have for drowning prevention. So our motto is, prevent is to save, educate not to drown.
Key to Sobrasa's drowning prevention education is the realistic understanding that lifeguards will probably never be able to patrol more than 40% of Brazil's beaches. Therefore, it's unrealistic to tell the public to only swim on beaches with lifeguards. Instead, Sobrasa believes it's far more effective to save lives by educating the public about rip current hazards, so they can avoid and manage the risk. For over 27 years, Sobrasa has been delivering drowning prevention programs to tens of millions of Brazilians. Rip current education is a major part of these programs.
And then we have Pool More Safe, which is we teach swimming teachers on how to provide classes to their students and classes in water safety also. And then we have Sobrasa Kids, which is bring students from fundamental school to the beach or to the rivers and give them a class of water safety. And then we have King at School, which is we go to the fundamental school and give a very short class, about 30 to 40 minutes, present our comic book, present our video and cartoon. And then we have Surf More Safe, which is teach to surfers how to prevent, how to recognize the problem, how to prevent drowning by using their surfboards. And then we have the last one, which is to teach aquatic emergency to health professional, physical professional.
In 2022, the Global Courier Corporation, DHL, recognized the vital importance of Sobrasa's drowning prevention programs and agreed to sponsor their public education initiatives. is Brazil's strategy of reducing rip current incidents, particularly on beaches not patrolled by lifeguards, using dedicated and creative public education, the example that other countries need to follow. In Australia, 3 years has passed since the drowning of Ryan Martin at Fingal's Dreamtime Beach. And another rip current tragedy has recently occurred. Tourists and locals continue to swim along this unpatrolled stretch of coastline, and there have been dozens of rip current rescues over the summer. Despite efforts by Steve Kudzias and the Fingal community to have a lifeguard service implemented at Dreamtime, authorities are yet to act. Fingal is home to the Jurakai Surf and Culture Group, an indigenous organization committed to helping Aboriginal kids be actively involved in surfing and surf lifesaving. The organization was named in honor of the Bundjalung Nation member who, in the early 1900s, was renowned for carrying out daring surf rescues. Joel Slab coordinates the group and runs the beach safety program. Jurakai, along with other members of the community, have been involved in dozens of rip current rescues along Dreamtime Beach.
Let's talk about rips. Woodra, what's the best way to spot a rip?
It's usually like real messy.
Steve has invited Rob to Fingal to share his knowledge about rip currents and to see firsthand the significant issues that the community is facing.
So the patrol beach with the surf club is on that side of the headland, but everyone comes here. So why do they come here?
It's northerly wind. This is absolute paradise down here. Well, appears to be paradise until, as you can see now, there's two flash rips, nearly 3 in a row here.
Yep.
Starting to draw out, and they sort of fill into a gutter, and the gutter takes it around the headland.
That's why headlands are so dangerous, because in this case, if you've got, like today, if you've got a wind coming from the south, it's going to push the water up and push it out against the headland. And the opposite conditions when it's from the northeast, even though this is protected, the waves are going to be breaking out there, and the water is going to gradually move up this way and out again. So you're going to have a rip here no matter which way the waves are coming from.
Most of the rip locations almost tee up where a lot of the ramps to the beach are, a lot of the public access.
It's a classic situation, right? You're just setting up people to get in trouble in rip currents, and there's no one there to save them. But you guys have done some rescues. How often are you doing that?
Look, as a local community, it wouldn't be shy of maybe one a week between us all that we're doing a rescue here.
Wow.
2 weeks ago, we had a mass rescue where 6 kids and 3 adults were caught in a rip. And it was only by the swift actions of a few of our local surfers that they managed to get home to their parents, and fathers got back to their wives that night.
In Costa Rica, strides are being taken to address their high number of rip current drownings. On a few of the nation's popular tourist beaches, the American Embassy is working in partnership with the Red Cross, and they have begun a limited program of funding lifeguard services. Rip current safety signs created by the government and the Red Cross have been placed on over 100 beaches, but not without some resistance from the local communities.
It's very curious because we have to fight with the locals because they say that we scare the people. Now, in some beaches, they say, hey, put me a sign here because I need that the people feel that they are safe here with us.
In 2019, a new law was passed by the Costa Rican National Assembly, mandating that coastal communities must provide professional lifeguards along their most popular beaches. But the new regulations put all the responsibility onto what are often small municipalities, to not only find and train the lifeguards, but also to pay for them. this plan has not been well received.
In some cases, there's municipalities that hire a lifeguard by themselves without the help of any other institution. But okay, it's a model. We have to copy this model in the rest of the municipality.
In a few cases, residents of popular towns that have rising rip current incidents have had to take matters into their own hands without any financial support. On the Caribbean coast of Costa Rica, locals living along the beaches of Playa Grande and Playa Arrecife have responded to a surge in rip current drownings by creating the Caribbean Guard, a voluntary lifeguard service that, so far, has not received any funding from the local town or businesses. Using equipment donated by Swim Safe Costa Rica, a non-government organization, the Caribbean Guard provide lifeguards to several beaches, and their number of volunteer lifeguards are increasing.
We currently have 8 certified lifeguards on the Caribbean Guard team, and we have 5 lifeguards that still have a few things to finish in order to get their complete certification. And we're hoping to have them finish their certification and also add more new lifeguards in August when we have our next lifeguard training course.
I'm going to tell her everything I'm doing so you don't scare her.
But for this all-volunteer lifeguard service to continue, the Caribbean Guard hope that their local municipality will one day provide much-needed funding. Back at Dominical Beach, and Steve Fergus and his community are one step closer to finding the lifeguards they desperately need to patrol their local beach.
Today at Dominical Beach, we have the biggest move forward for the lifeguard program and the safety of swimmers on this beach in its history. Today, we have training session going on, which is certification training to be a paid beach lifeguard anywhere in Costa Rica. They are training 17 new people that are local surfers to be lifeguards today. One of the greatest moves this lifeguard program has ever made. It is a blessing for everyone who ever comes to this beach in the future.
All right, what do we learn? What do we feel?
Running this lifeguard certification course is Ernst Vanderpoel and Cesar Caso from Swim Safe Costa Rica, a non-government organization whose mission is to improve aquatic safety throughout Costa Rica by running grassroots drowning prevention programs in high-risk areas. Steve is just hoping that some of his locals pass the test and become certified lifeguards when the course concludes in 5 days. The Dominical community is counting on them. Back in the United States, authorities are dealing with a rip current problem that's nowhere near an ocean. The 5 Great Lakes of North America make up the largest body of fresh water on Earth, spanning 95,000 square miles, larger than the state of Texas. Since 2010, there have been over 1,100 drownings. In 2022 alone, 105 people lost their lives. More than half of all Great Lakes drownings occur on Lake Michigan. With few lifeguards and strong rip currents, rip current deaths on the Great Lakes are consistently high every summer. It's August 20th, 2015 at Grand Haven State Park on Lake Michigan. Surveillance footage captures the intensity of the waves pounding the shore. Officials have raised the red flag, indicating extremely dangerous beach conditions. Close to the pier, a powerful rip current surges. 2 teenage girls enter the water, unaware of the danger they're in. Among the beachgoers is local photographer Mike Dixon, who captures the events as they unfold. Within minutes, the 2 girls are trapped in a surging rip current and are quickly dragged offshore into deeper waters. Several bystanders hear their calls for help and race into the waves. One person, thinking fast, grabs an emergency life preserver.
One of the things that I was doing while we were taking pictures was directing the rescuers where the girls were, because the waves being 5 to 6 feet tall, they could not see the girls unless the girls were on top of the wave.
Rescuers reach the younger of the two girls, but her 14-year-old friend remains firmly in the jaws of the rip current and has now been pulled almost 200 yards from shore. More bystanders rush to help, but the pounding waves are creating impossible rescue conditions.
Initially, they tried to go out with boards, and each time a wave came, they'd make 20-foot progress and then get pushed back 10 feet.
Local surfer Zeb Boskool runs from the lighthouse pier and dives into the water.
I saw Mike pointing and other people pointing in the direction of where she was. Swam under as many sets as I could. Came up probably twice, and then the third time I came up, she came up right in my arm. She was not breathing, at least well, gargling, seemed to be making some type of noises, but not, not anything that's a good sign.
First responders arrive and attend to the girls. Fortunately, both of them survived. For Zeb and Mike, the events of that day have served as a harsh reminder of the rip current dangers along Lake Michigan.
The photos of the girls struggling to keep their head above water comes to mind just about every time I'm at the beach. I think about that day often.
The rip currents of the Great Lakes are very similar to those found on coastal beaches. But one significant difference is the wave activity that powers the currents. The Great Lakes tend to have smaller waves that break at a higher frequency. Though there is another factor here that can bring with it devastating rip current consequences.
People don't know that one of the most attractive features of Great Lakes beaches can be one of the most dangerous.
On the Great Lakes, piers, jetties, and lighthouses are common, and they inevitably attract swimmers and tourists. But they're also magnets for rip currents. With the right combination of wave direction and activity, these structures can quickly create a powerful current, shooting directly into deeper water offshore with what's known as a structural rip or boundary rip. These rips can become even more dangerous for swimmers when longshore currents are added to the mix. Longshore currents are caused by large swells sweeping into the shoreline at an angle and quickly pushing water toward the structures.
Structural rips are very common on the Great Lakes. Where the waves are coming towards the beach on an angle, it drives in a longshore current, and when it reaches a groin or a jetty, that current is then deflected offshore. The amount of deflection and the speed of the rip depends not only on the size of the waves, but the width of the surf zone, the area of wave breaking, relative to the length of the groin or the jetty. If you are swimming adjacent to this jetty, when the waves are coming in at an angle, driving in a longshore current, those who are swimming close to the edge of that jetty may be drawn into that rip and then be moved offshore.
It's estimated that more than half of rip current drownings on the Great Lakes take place close to jetties and piers. Lake Michigan's Grand Haven State Beach, which has no lifeguards, is popular and located directly adjacent to the Lighthouse Pier. When conditions turn bad, these waters can quickly create a deadly rip current cluster. August 12, 2018 was one of those days.
It was a Sunday afternoon, the day after Coast Guard Festival. It was hotter than the blazes. Beautiful day, the water was warm. I just knew there was going to be a ton of people at the beach that day, so I kept my pager close, just expecting anything to happen. It just seems to on days like that around here. My pager went off. They were missing somebody near the pavilion in the surf. It was an older gentleman.
This is Becky Vargo from the Grand Haven Tribune. We are at Grand Haven State Park, where, as you can see, In the background here, we have a couple different human chains going, looking for a rescue. They're looking for somebody in the water. They've already rescued several people from the waves. They did find the man, and they did take him to the hospital, but unfortunately he passed away later that day. They are telling people to stay out of the water at Grand Haven, stay out of the water. There are rip currents and a longshore current. A couple hours later, tones go off. Now we've got multiple people in trouble at the beach. A couple different situations between the pier and the pavilion. And there was probably at least 3 or 4 chains going in different areas out here. There was a young man and a young woman who were the primary targets that they were searching for, and they got the young woman out. She was okay. Couldn't find the young man. So the human chains are going, and the pager's going off again and again. Somebody's in trouble closer to the pier. Somebody's in trouble south of the pier. Trying to keep everybody out of the water, and it's chaos. It's one of the craziest days I've ever seen. The young man was found after a while, but he also passed away. So we lost 2 people that day. A lot more people were in trouble.
More than 43 people drowned in Lake Michigan in 2022. Dave Benjamin manages the Great Lakes Surf Rescue Project, a nonprofit organization providing water safety courses to the public and first responders, as well as support to family and friends of drowning victims.
One of the big contributing factors why we have so many drownings in the Great Lakes is because there's a huge lack of public water safety education. And then there's a big lack of lifeguards, as well as rescue signage, rescue equipment, beach signage.
Combining the lack of safety education with an age group that's willing to take risks, it's perhaps not surprising that many of the lives lost on the Great Lakes are those of teenagers. Here, young boys swimming at Indiana Dunes State Park are only yards from a powerful rip current. On this same beach, just minutes after this was filmed, another swimmer drowned in a rip current. In 2013, 15-year-old Matthew Coker was on a school camping trip at New Buffalo City Beach on Lake Michigan. While standing in shallow water, Matt was taken by a rip current.
They were just jumping the waves. They were only like waist high to knee high, playing in the water. They weren't swimming out in the water. When I think about Matt growing up, I think about how happy he was. He just embraced life. It seemed like he always had a smile on his face and was very easygoing and gentle and had such a wonderful sense of humor. He went to camp to get service hours for high school. He went with 4 of his best friends. He was supposed to have the experience of a lifetime, and he was only a couple towns away. The phone rang. John came running up, and then you took the phone.
Yeah.
And
yeah, he said, I says, what's going on? And she says, your son has been in a water accident. I says, well, how's he doing? She says, you should come right away. Then the phone rang again, and it's the emergency room doctor. And he said, you gotta come right away. You know, his condition's grave. Or I said, what's his condition? I says, is he alive? Is he alive? And he goes, his condition is grave. He was hooked up to all these tubes, and they said that, you know, things are dropping. And he says, you know, do you want the rest of the family here? So we were all surrounded by, Matt? We were holding them. We were all praying, telling them we love them. And then it all went, and Matt was gone. And that's when, everything changed.
After the death of their son, John and Kathy formed the Matthew Coker Foundation, dedicated to water safety education.
But today it's been 1,354 days since Matt got caught in a rip current. Matt's Matt's drowning was totally preventable if he would have had the knowledge, if he would have been educated with the right information about water safety.
We felt so passionate that we didn't want this to happen to anybody else. So even though we couldn't save Matt, we could use our experience to get the word out for other people and try and prevent any of this happening to anybody else.
Since 2014, the Coker Foundation, working in collaboration with Dave Benjamin and the Great Lakes Surf Rescue Project, has presented over 1,000 water safety talks to schools, reaching tens of thousands of students. A key feature of their presentation deals with how to respond when caught in a rip.
Thank you. My name is Dave Benjamin. I'm with the Great Lakes Surf Rescue Project. We're going to talk about water safety today.
In Australia, Rob Brander also continues his mission to teach younger Australians about rip current safety.
Today we've got big waves. All up the beach is big waves. No one's going to be swimming up there. If they want to go for a swim, they're going to come down here where it's nice and flat and it looks really safe. This looks like the safest part of the beach today. But there's actually a really strong rip current. And this is why they're dangerous, because most people, including Australians, don't know what rips look like. One of the big challenges for beach safety around the world is that most people can't spot rip currents. And there's been plenty of research that has shown that to be the case. And that's a huge problem, because you've got people going to beaches with rips and they can't spot the danger, and they walk into the water, and without knowing it, they're in a rip current. The simplest way to look for rips is to look for the dark gaps between breaking waves. But some rips can be kind of hard to spot, and there's different visual clues. Often rip currents have a surface texture that's a bit bumpy, a bit choppy, the water looks a bit different. Often there's clouds of sand churned up that's flowing offshore. And often, because rip currents can erode the beach, if you look along the beach, you can sometimes see these embayments carved out in the beach.
In New Zealand, beach authorities and scientists have determined that 80% of the beach-going public can't recognize a rip current. So they've turned to artificial intelligence to help address the problem.
Rip currents are the #1 hazard on New Zealand beaches, not only surf beaches, but beaches that have rocky groins and headlands too. Staggeringly, 1 in 6 people in New Zealand say that they've been caught in a rip current. Our research shows that about 40% of people are confident that they can see a rip current or identify a rip current, when actually, when we've tested them, it works out at about 20%, which really means over 80% of the New Zealand public can't really identify or spot a rip. Surf Life Saving New Zealand can only provide lifeguards on around 92 beaches. We know in New Zealand that there's over 700 beaches that people swim at. So we've had to think outside the box to try and develop a strategy to help people who swim on non-lifeguarded beaches.
With many people choosing to swim on unpatrolled beaches, Surf Life Saving New Zealand have also looked for innovative ways that they can provide rip current safety support for those not swimming between the flags. Surf Life Saving New Zealand, in partnership with NIWA, the National Institute of Water and Atmospheric Science, have developed an artificial intelligence program that can recognize rip currents with incredible accuracy.
The way artificial intelligence sort of does its learning is quite similar to how you might think a human might learn. And again, it all starts with the data. So the first thing with artificial intelligence and training a model is, what data do you have? In our case, we've got plenty of images from a diverse range of coastlines. The more data we feed it in, the better accuracy it gets.
This method
can have one glance at an image or video still image and then make that conclusion to say, yes, there's a rip current present or not. If it's red or warm colors, that will typically be where the artificial intelligence is saying it's definitely sure that this is a rip current. And where the colors are becoming cooler, it's less probable of being a rip current. Currently, we're at 91, 92% accuracy in correctly identifying rip currents. The amazing thing about this is the coastal setting doesn't matter. Whether it's black sand beach, white sand beach, and also the angle at which you observe the beach doesn't matter at all. And we've generalized this model enough so it's intelligent enough to do that identification by itself. It also doesn't matter if it's video imagery or still imagery.
Over the next 3 years, as part of a government-funded research program with NIWA, we aim to get the AI technology to be able to identify a rip current from somebody's phone. That's our long-term aim, and we really hope that we'll get there.
Back at Dreamtime Beach, 5 years have passed since the death of Ryan Martin. And Steve Kudzius and the Fingal community have made no progress getting support for a lifeguard service. There's now been 5 fatalities at the beach, and to date, the only safety response from authorities has been a hazard warning sign erected at the main car park. Tourists and others living in close by continue to swim at Dreamtime Beach. Despite the beach's dangerous history, some popular travel blogs continue to promote Dreamtime as one of the best beaches to visit. Looking for options to keep Dreamtime safe, the Fingal community invites a Sydney-based drone company to showcase an innovative drone system that can drop multiple flotation devices into the water.
Yeah, again, thank you for everyone for coming today. Hopefully this will be our new lead-in to help keep our community safe. I think we're all pushing in the same direction to limit the amount of drownings and limit the amount of casualties here. And this is hopefully our next step in keeping our beaches safe.
This is called rescue. Basically, this gets attached at the bottom of the drone. At the moment, we can attach 4 of them. So if you see a swimmer in distress, these can be dropped. And once they are dropped, they inflate automatically. We successfully dropped 3 rescues very close to the swimmers. They all opened up the way they were supposed to, and I'm monitoring the swimmers now.
So how was it?
Yeah, good.
You hold up well?
Yeah, held me easy.
Especially being a bit bigger?
Yeah. Easy to hold on to and wash away?
No, not at all. No,
it's a good idea.
A unique feature of this drone is that it's got a loudspeaker attached to it as well. So you can also comfort the person after you've dropped the tubes to them and notify them that help's on their way. The more you can talk to someone, the better chance you got of relaxing them, getting them to relax and just float with the tube.
I think it's fantastic that the Fingal community is taking on these reactive measures to the rip current problem, but it's a lot of responsibility and a lot of pressure for community to have to do that. Aside from having full-time lifeguards, what's really needed is a hazard assessment of Dreamtime Beach. You really need to know more about the physical hazards, the rip currents. You need to know about what they're doing to keep people safe, the signage, is it effective? And you need to know a lot more about the people coming to the beach. Who are they? Where are they from? What did they understand about rip currents and beach safety in general? What's really needed is a full hazard assessment.
It's a comprehensive approach to really understanding the life risk of rip currents on a specific beach. And this kind of study has only ever been tackled once before, along one of Europe's most deadly coastlines. It's summer in France's Plage de la Lette Blanche, and like every other summer, this long stretch of white sand becomes a magnet for beachgoers. But this year, sharing the beach with tourists, locals, and lifeguards is a science research team from the University of Bordeaux and France's National Research Institute for Agriculture, Food, and the Environment. They're here to undertake a critical analysis of the complex rip current hazards that exist along the beaches of southwest France. To do this, They plan to take a holistic approach by combining research data from 3 key elements of the rip current problem.
Along this coast in southwest France, we have a very particular configuration where the rip channel is much more complex as it bends southwards and then northwards. And this results in a complex morphological control that changes as the tide changes. From a lifeguarding point of view, they have to deal with the tide here. It's very different from any other coast in the world because of the big tide range, which can reach 5 meters. The wave conditions and the hazard conditions can dramatically change within the day, within just a few hours, from a rip-dominated beach to a shore break-dominated beach. And these zones of safe area change, and they can change a lot and by a long distance. So that's a very interesting thing, how they try to balance the hazard and how they balance that with beachgoer behavior who do not like to be moved from part to part of the beach. What we want to address here is the life risk, and this risk, it is driven by 3 primary components. The first is the hazard, basically here the rip currents. The second strong component is exposure, how many people go to the beach. And the third component is vulnerability. Who are the people who have risky behaviors? Today we will measure the topography of the beach. So basically what we will do is to walk along the beach by transects. And so this data will also be used, geo-referenced the videos from the drone, and with this data we'll be able to derive a digital elevation model of the beach. So we use, for instance, a video station, a 180-degree video station, which is used to both count the number of people on the beach and in the water, so that's for the exposure. And this video camera is also used to infer the nearshore currents and the morphological evolution of the beach. And so we try to validate them by collecting some data in situ in the field. And for this, we deploy drifters, which are GPS-equipped buoys that are designed so that they do not surf, but they really go with the currents. And so we deploy them when the rip is active. And this data is used to really understand the evolution in both time and space of the rip currents and to provide a complete picture of its evolution. And so for the third component, social scientists work on this vulnerability aspect, and for that they develop some surveys that they give to beachgoers entering or exiting the beach.
We are trying to get information about the behavior of the people. Are they behaving risky or not? And the risk perceptions of rip currents. How do they assess the risk? How do they feel the activities is risky or not?
To the best of our knowledge, this is the very first experiment where we will collect data on all the 3 components of the risk. And I think that this project is also an outstanding example of how scientists, lifeguard institutions, and councils, local councils, can work together to address a very important societal problem, which is the reduction of life risk.
In Fingal, there's finally a breakthrough that could make a real difference to the safety of the beach. It's Easter 2022 in Fingal, 7 years after the Ryan Martin rip current tragedy. Dreamtime Beach still doesn't have a lifeguard service. But after years of campaigning for support from the Fingal community, authorities have now installed a flotation life ring and an emergency response beacon with camera system that links back to surf life-saving operations and first responders. For Steve and Aaron Kudzias and the Fingal community, it's a huge step forward for public safety on Dreamtime Beach. But they believe they still have a lot more work to do.
We've really done well to be able to get life rings and emergency beacon, but Dreamtime Beach is a place that really needs more, and that has to be lifeguards.
In Costa Rica, after a long week of training on Dominical Beach, 17 newly trained lifeguards can proudly show off their certificates. SwimSafe have now trained over 100 volunteer lifeguards across Costa Rica as they move towards their goal of creating the nation's first volunteer life-saving federation. The Costa Rican law mandating municipalities to fund their own lifeguard services is only slowly making progress. 4 years after the law was passed, Costa Rica has just 8 beaches patrolled by Red Cross lifeguards and 16 beaches patrolled by private lifeguards. The Costa Ricans have a long journey ahead of them before they reach their goal of greatly reducing rip current drownings on their nation's beaches. In Sydney, Australia, Rob Brander continues his tireless campaign to save lives with rip current education.
So when you go to the beach, you look for these dark gaps. The other things you look for is the water being bumpy. So rips take water offshore, waves bring it back in. So the water comes together and it makes this bumpy and ripply surface. The recent scientific advances we've made in measuring rip currents and measuring the different types of rip currents has shown us the variety in ways that they flow, which is great scientifically, but it's also really raised a lot of important questions about what should people do when they get stuck in a rip current. Is there a particular action they should take based on how the rip is behaving? This way, you don't cross the road without looking both ways. At least I hope you don't. And you do that automatically. So you should never go to a beach without spending 5 minutes looking for a rip current or looking for the flags. Because if you take those 5 minutes, you look for all this stuff, that means you're thinking about rips and you're thinking about the safest place to swim. You have to spend that 5 minutes. It's so important. Despite rip currents being unique on different beaches around the world, there is a global acceptance about what you should do to survive a rip current if you find yourself caught in one. The first thing to do is just to relax. Don't panic, because the rip current does not pull you under the water. It's just taking you for a ride offshore. The second thing is don't swim back to the beach against the rip current. That's only going to tire you out. The best thing to do is just to conserve your energy by floating, and then you can signal for help. If you are a good swimmer, you can try and swim out of rip currents. Look around. You're looking for the white water at the side of the rip, and you slowly make your way to that and then come back in. But that's only if you're a really good swimmer. Again, the best thing to do is to really conserve your energy and float and signal for help.
Rip currents will always be the major safety issue on the world's beaches, and millions of people will continue to choose to swim on beaches not patrolled by lifeguards. It has become crystal clear that the key to reducing global rip current fatalities in the future is better and more creative beach safety education for the public, including both school kids and adults. And that's been the motivating factor for all of the inspiring scientists, lifeguards, and beach safety advocates represented in this program. For Steve and Erin Kudzius, who funded this film, reducing rip current incidents through education is a long-term mission to which they've donated enormous amounts of time and financial resources.
I think this is a fantastic website. I think it's really come together perfectly.
And as they launch their latest endeavor, ripcurrentsafety.com, the world's most comprehensive rip current safety information website, they reflect on their simple goal.
Erin and I are very proud of our work so far within the rip current safety field. We genuinely believe that education can save lives.
It's all about better education through easy, accessible beach safety resources.
The devastation and trauma that I've been through, and along with my family, through these rip current tragedies that we've witnessed, has really driven us to continue on the journey we're going, and that's to try to save lives through education. The more we can educate people, the likelihood of people drowning is a lot less. we are really committed to ensuring that we can reduce the amount of families going through the pain that we did and the pain that we witnessed. Even if we can save one life, we really feel we've done something good.